Welcome. I welcome you here tonight. My name is John Medford. I'm a communications student at Liberty University. I'm here to talk to you, just to inform you on what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, what is commonly referred to as shell shock. Now, a lot of people associate this, according from our media, to maybe the military or maybe firefighters, more of that line of duty. My main idea here is to turn it and let you see how it can affect corrections officers as well. Just a little bit of information for you here tonight. There's three ways I want to explain this. First, by explaining how the work environment of a corrections officer can affect a CO's life and cause this start of PTSD. Also, I want to state how outside stressors can also start PTSD and activate that within an individual or a corrections officer. And also by explaining long-term effects of PTSD and what can it do to that corrections officer's life. Let me define PTSD for you here real quick. We got a general idea of it by the name shell shock. Obviously, after a traumatic event, it's maybe remembering some things that happened during that event, probably the worst parts of it. It maybe wakes you up at night, causes fits of rage. But according to a study, a mouse model of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD is characterized by persistence of experiencing avoidance and hyperarousal symptoms following the traumatic event. Hyperarousal symptoms include difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, irritability or outbursts of anger, difficulty concentrating, hypervigilance, and exaggerated startle response. So obviously, that's where they get the name shell shock, because that person would be startled a lot of times, especially coming out of a deep sleep and having dreams about that event. Obviously, I want to start with the facilities here and how it goes back into causing PTSD. Obviously, coming into a facility of this sort, you'll be kind of depressed walking into that environment, so this will automatically set your mind in a negative mood and make you think of bad events, obviously. So if something happens within that facility, it can also start that process of initiation, that PTSD. One of the main factors in a facility of corrections environment are assaults. You look at an object like this and you wouldn't think that this would be turned into a weapon. Well, it could, and it could inflict some huge damage on someone, especially to their face. Especially compared to something like this, you would expect this not to be found in a facility, but oftentimes knives are. But you wouldn't expect something like a glass, especially if it was plastic, to be able to be melted down and fastened into that knife, which both can do pretty big damage to someone's body, causing stress, and maybe a lot of times coming back into PTSD and causing that to start. 33.5% of all assaults in prisons and jails are committed by inmates against staff. That was in a study here by Dr. Donald Steele. He stated also, he had another statement in this study. He said, of hundreds of correctional officers I have treated, 6% of their stress can be attributed to administration, 15% from inmates, and 15% from other staff, as well as 10% from personal issues. So their facility is a big reason for PTSD. My second tie-in here to PTSD and corrections is outside stress. Obviously, I've got some statistics here to back this up, just to inform you. 10% of the reason for stress is deal with the outside factors in that study I had mentioned. Most COs only live 18 months after retirement on average. So obviously something like that goes back into them being in high stress. 58th birthday of a CO is on average their last. That's another huge factor that plays into that. That's got to be depressing for that person, and obviously stress is one of the main factors of PTSD. Also go into a third tie-in factor here, explain how long-term effects of PTSD on corrections and the officers within that facility. Many negative consequences can be developed from PTSD. I want to give you some more statistics here. According to a study, suicide risk among correctional officers, they have a 39% higher suicide rate than any other occupation, and that's a huge factor. and that's something that could be caused long-term, as well as heart disease and diabetes can be a huge factor as well. So in my conclusion here, I see here PTSD continues to be a factor in corrections, as well as a lot of other emergency response teams and firefighters and military. By having studies done at Doctors Resource, they continue to treat correctional officers for PTSD. And I hope here that this has informed you of what PTSD is in the line of corrections and how it can affect your loved ones as well. Thank you for joining me tonight. The first one was going